all you can and you're running with kings. But how far could you go if you run with the wind? And the chances you take are what give you wings, and you can fly.
Hello there. Welcome to Consider Civility. I'm Lew Bayer, and I would like to talk to you for a few minutes today about the path to civility. And so you can see in the graphic there, we have a path and at the front end a compass. And this is an idea, concept that we use at Civility Experts to help people understand that civility is a measurable competency. We have at civilityexperts.com a free download. It's an assessment called the Civility Culture Compass. And it's a survey, a test that we encourage, a sample group, cohort, at least a dozen people if possible from a workplace business unit to complete. And it gives us an idea about, number one, if there are aspects of this front section, the compass, the 4 conditions that are necessary to be at a steady state before we actually implement civility training or start a civility initiative. And you can see there on the graphic, we have engagement, and engagement is about a trust measure. So if there are not sufficient levels of trust in an organization, our view is that it is not prudent to spend a lot of time and money in training, because people don't learn if they don't feel safe, and trust is an aspect of psychological safety. So we would do a test survey, trust assessment. There's all various kinds that you can use. We have a few. If you're part of our masterclass or our membership group at ICTC, we'd be happy to share some of those tools with you. In addition to engagement, we look at change. So in this case, we're trying to assess, is the organization in flux? Have there been significant changes, downsizing, new leadership, changes in the sector, financial aspects, etc., that are impacting the way people are living in the workplace or the outlook, financial security of the organization, those kind of things. So it's important to recognize that change is an ongoing impact factor that impacts the effectiveness of training. And if we don't assess it properly, we find once again that even if people have the skills, if the stress levels or the bounce back, the hardiness and resilience are not embedded in a workplace, that the team suffers, and once again, civility, even if it's trained really well, will not take hold. So there's various ways to test that as well. It's a range of questions to start with, and kind of looking situational analysis, organizational assessment, looking at the organization, the sector, kind of global influences, and so on. The next thing we want to do is check alignment. And alignment means that we want to know that the strategic goals, the intention of the leadership in terms of what the organization is trying to achieve, and understanding what the values and mission are and what they look like in terms of day-to-day practice. We want to make sure that there's alignment at all levels, so that at the front line, they have the same interpretation of the organizational values, the same understanding of the goals and the intent and purpose of the company and the work that is being done as the leadership has at all levels. So we're looking for that alignment. We have a proprietary process that we use, and once again, if you're part of our masterclass or part of our affiliate group, we're happy to share that with you. Lastly on that list is readiness, and readiness in this case references the organization's ability to provide the resources necessary for a training initiative. So while it's not always a very costly endeavor, there still is capacity that's required, meaning, do we have the manpower, do we have on-site trainers, do we have the resources needed, everything from printing the materials to a proper workspace to do the training in. Do we have whatever funding might be required to be able to deliver the training? And do we have the time? Sometimes that's overlooked. We might have the money, but do we have the time? So if the baseline level that's required in each of these 4 conditions is set, if we've achieved that, then we're going to go ahead with some strategic civility training. So the assessment helps us identify if the conditions are set for success. If they're not, for example, if trust is low or there aren't resources, we can look at how to address that. Do we do some trust building first before we do our training? Do we apply for a grant or get some funds, or hold off the training until we have adequate resources in terms of time? We're going to make sure that those conditions are met, regardless of whatever that might look like. Then, the assessment also tells us which of the 4 core competencies, excuse me, that was a yawn. We're going to decide which of the 4 competencies we need to train in. And so you see them listed there on the path. So once we've determined organizational readiness, we're going to move on. Systems thinking, continuous learning, cultural competence, or social intelligence. And depending on the outcomes of our assessment, sometimes there'll be a priority need. And sometimes if the organization has specific goals, we can marry that up with a competency. So, for example, if the organization, the civility indicators testing shows us that internal communication, external customer service, trust, there's some key indicators that tie directly to social intelligence. And if we identify those indicators, we might suggest that we should train in social intelligence first. Similarly, if the indicators show, if it shows that there's bias or cross-cultural aspects, if there's problems with collaboration related to diversity across the teams, if there's generational or gender issues related to communication, respect at work, and so on, then we're going to focus on cultural competence. Again, if indicators like low resilience, inability to learn at pace, some of those indicators pop up, then we'll focus on continuous learning. And systems thinking often ties to low engagement. That might be surprising, but once you look at the metrics, we see that if people don't understand how the work that they do has value or how it fits into the big picture, if they don't understand how outside factors can influence decision making at work by their higher ups and so forth, then we often see that systems thinking can offset some of those indicators, and so we might do training in that area first. The bottom line is, many people don't realize that there are these skills that as a collective make up competency in civility. And if we can teach those 4 skills and achieve baseline levels across the roster, then oftentimes we find we don't have to do team building training, we don't have to do conflict management, we don't have to do diversity training, we don't have to do change management, because all of those things are covered off under these 4 skills that underpin the ability to be competent in civility. So this is the civility path. It sort of captures in a nutshell what we would do if we're trying to incorporate a civility initiative. I hope that was helpful. If you need some information about the assessments, about the civility indicators, about civility symptom surveys, metrics, and so on, some of that you can find at civilityexperts.com under resources. Otherwise, you can email us, events@civilityexperts.com, and we can certainly help you find some of those items. I hope that you will subscribe and click like to our channel, and please click through to learn a little bit more about the Isabelle Song that is our theme song on this Consider Civility channel. Thank you. See you again on Consider Civility.
Reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.